Hi, my name is Benedict for Higher Hertz, having a look at the reshinied FabFilter Twin, which has now gone into cubed mode. FabFilter, I don't think FabFilter need much in the way of introduction. I think most people know who they are. They are a revered brand. I don't own any of their stuff. I admire what they do, but their sound has never kind of grabbed me. I did, however, very much enjoy working with Volcano. I'll try and pop the picture up there with the review that I did where I remixed and mastered a piece using only Volcano. I thought that was a lot of fun, and I liked the way it sounded. But there's still something about that's just never quite appealed to me. This will be a different video from the usual, in that it will have less structure, simply because I'm going to attack this one more as almost like an unboxing, a first playing with. There is no box, it's already in my door. And this is how it opens, and it sounds like this as it opens. Okay, sounds pretty good. The extras that they say that we've got is that fourth oscillator and effects, and they've brought in more of the stuff that was in Volcano and now standardized their whole range with this modulation approach. Oh, and also apparently the arpeggiator is new. I am going to leave the help on. There is a thing to have pop-up help. I'm going to leave it on because, as I say, I haven't spent more than a few seconds on this before now. One thing that I did find was that if you have the arpeggiator on, it stays on from patch to patch. Whether there's an option to alter that, I don't know, but I got to say I did find it annoying because I went into pads to have a quick listen to pads, and the pads just weren't playing. Most of the time that I had this open was wasted because it took me to realize, hang on, the arpeggiator is still on. I can see some circumstances in which that might be good, other circumstances in which it's like, what are you doing? There may be a feature that I just didn't obviously see. Now, obviously, it's a very busy interface, very busy indeed. There are some options. You can resize, small, medium, large, extra large. To my mind, it doesn't necessarily help. That is, I felt it with Volcano, and I perceive it's going to be possibly a bigger problem here. It's so uber cool for modern things, but they pitch their synth as being very analog. Now, I'm one of the first to say we don't need a skeuomorphic, looks like reality kind of thing. I get tired of, and I liked the fact that Tal's filter wasn't trying to look like a Juno 106 or whatever it is. But modern sometimes just out-clevers itself. And I worry that this might be the case simply because, and not everyone's going to feel this way, but I have seen comments from a few other people who admit to being somewhere on the autism or ADHD type spectrum. I see them as being kind of similar to one another. Commonly, one has both. And I struggle with this. I look at this and I feel like my eyes and brain are just kind of going everywhere. It's hard to compartmentalize what's going on. It's so modern, but it's also so confusing. So you can pick a size, but does the size make things easier? I'm not sure. I'm going to go with big for now because it's going to make it easier for viewers. There's also this button over here, which may or may not be as relevant. I won't use it in this situation because, well, it just makes it feel like it's so on a 24-inch monitor that I feel like it's very diffused and very much harder to see what's going on. Plus, you're going to miss stuff that disappears under my head. But it is an interesting option for immersion. So there are swings and roundabouts in the decisions that they have made. Some people are going to feel like, wow, this is so cool. I immediately feel fractured, and I worry that that's going to become a problem. Now, FabFilter pitched this as being super analog, and I saw a couple of little reviews before I was asked to do this. Generally, I avoid reviews if I know I'm going to be reviewing it, where people were like, yeah, it's great, but, and they just couldn't kind of get into it. And one person pointing out, well, but it's not, and they seem to be comparing it to serum or pigments or far more what we might call high-end synths. Now, this is priced kind of like a high-end synth, but it's not featured like one. And that, I think, is going to create some sense of disconnect, people coming in assuming that they're getting a serum or a pigments or a zebra or whatever, when in reality it's actually a far simpler synth with a very complicated front end. And that doesn't mean that you can't do a lot with it, but I think it's creating some confusion. I think, however, that FabFilter have already given us some indication as to where they think it sits. Up above, on the bit that didn't fit into the bit that I sliced off the page, are the usual filters, compressors, reverbs, all of their fancy high-end, everyone raves about plugins. And then they've got the creative effects, the sort of the second tier, which is Saturn, Volcano, Timeless, their delay unit, and then right down at the very end, next to their basic and freebies, is Twin, the synth. So I don't think they see this as being one of their main line products. I think that it is extra. I think it is a much smaller product in their minds. But as soon as you see this massive interface, you tend to think, wow, this is full-on extreme. Everything. And my approach is simply going to be to spend some time with it, doing the things that I would normally do when I find a synth and pick it up and go, is this something I want to take into my life? That's the way the review is going to move. We start with this. Yes, we have presets, but I tend to studiously avoid presets as a general rule. Yes, they're there. If you want to hear the presets and decide whether they're the presets that you want, go for it. You don't need me, you'll have other people who are going through it. We start with this default sound. They kind of encourage you here, just try this, try that, meddle with this little bit, meddle with that little bit, not my thing. But they are aware of people like me. They've given a clean button. Be kind of nice if we didn't have to dig into the presets to get there. There's space up here, but nonetheless, there is a button that says clean. They start this where I believe all synths should start, with a most basic of sounds. Okay, cool. We've got a filter in. Everything is done with this visual interface. And then everything pops up from said visual interface, and then with this button the extra information pops up. I would like to turn it off, but I perceive that it's possible I may hit some stuff in here that makes no sense at all, because there are lots of things that are just little icons and obtuse, like this. What's this? Phase sync button, toggles, oscillator, phase sync on and off. Okay, fair enough. I've never seen a phase thing look like that. So they've got their whole iconic representation, but I think they've had to make some of their icons up as they go. But we're dominated with this very FabFilter kind of thing. Fair enough. A spectrum view can be handy when making a sound. I guess it's just amusing to have it there. We can turn filters on and off, double-clicking. Their standard approach seems to work. We can choose shapes by clicking here, and you sort of have to work it out. But most things are clickable, so it's not hard to work out what is probably clickable and not clickable. And then you can choose their different models. I liked the models and felt that they made a big difference in Volcano. My first feelings here is they don't necessarily make a big difference, but on a simple scenario, you're not necessarily going to hear that difference as much. But there is a great feeling of, for a synth that they're telling us is incredibly analog, there is this great feeling of it being incredibly precise, incredibly polite, which, of course, is the hallmark of a digital synth. So if this were an analog synth, I might say that this was a JX8P, which some people hated for how smooth and polite that it was compared to, you know, the even the early Alpha Junos and things like that. So that means it's going to be a sound that you love or don't love. But I'm not making a judgment here at the moment. It's easy with Reason synths, with Thor and Europa, which are tremendously powerful instruments, to initially think, gee, they're a bit polite. But there are ways to make them as interesting as you want them to be. So we can choose a filter model and then do stuff with it. We've got an ADS-R with a hold. Okay, so it holds after release. Fair enough. It will work, so you sustain up, down. I'm not a big fan of these sorts of modes or ways of seeing things to program them. I actually find it a little... But it's here. We can change our slopes. At least the thing stays consistent, as in it doesn't... The MSEG type shape doesn't keep disappearing off the screen, because that... So what length is it? It can go to 25 seconds. Not huge, but enough for pads. And just changing these shapes. Okay, all fair enough. This must be the modulation target, and then the main level. Okay, so you can control where A goes to, how loud A goes. In this, I will leave that alone for the moment. Obviously, that's potential for modulations or doing things. Master tuning. Double click, you can type in, what if I shift, or what if I control click it? Okay, control click will reset things. Okay, so double clicking will open up the value for you to type her in, and control clicking will reset them. Okay, fair enough. Oh, now if I want to envelope this, oh, I should get into shapes. Open this filter up. So it goes from pretty square to 100% nothing. Fair enough. It's a one-way thing. That in some ways always made more sense than a two-way thing. We'd have to look into that because we've got square, which is a kind of pulse, and then square pure. So obviously there's a slight difference in shape. I guess they're suggesting that this is a little rounder than that. This does sound harder. Oh, look, in the background there's a thing showing me what my wave shape is. So if we move to... looks the same. I guess we just have to tell the difference here. So there's a subtle difference. One is probably more analog and the other is more pure. Triangle, well, that's triangular. Got a small amount of overtones. Triangle pure has more overtones. And sine wave, which understandably enough has no overtones. White noise, fair enough. And pink noise, fair enough. But there doesn't seem to be any way to modify the noise. So the ability to modify an oscillator at this point seems relatively minimal. Okay, we can pan each oscillator. Interesting enough. We can obviously turn our oscillators on and off. And change their level. That's nice in many ways that it actually defaults to 8 foot rather than 16. And then there's a sync. Obviously syncing to just an invisible third-party oscillator. That must be resetting phase each time. All right, fair enough. And filter. So if I wanted to add a filter envelope, this seems to be the modulation matrix here, then I would be new XLFO. I'm not sure why they're XLFOs. I guess it just makes them more exciting to have an X on the front of them. So this must be the output and overall level. It's annoying having controls so close to each other, and we will drag that to, well, that looks like the thing I want to, okay, relatively easy. And then it does this weird sort of frog leg thing at the side. But, and this is something that I do think is nice, you've got a much more delicate control over this modulation than some other similar sort of drag from here to there, and then everything gets very difficult. But if I realize that wasn't really what I wanted to target, I can just kill it. I guess we're going to go here. That's excessive. So I can change level here and here. And it is nicely weighted in that I can get fine amounts of modulation. Some systems just fall in a heap when it goes from no modulation to like Doctor Who on a bender. So that's kind of annoying. So plus, minus. Oh, okay, so that just inverts the phase. It's not changing. Disable, invert, delete. So it seems to me that if I wanted to put a delay on that, I'd probably have to create an envelope generator. So if I output there to there, so if I put that to, no, that didn't help. Okay. So that's the amount of time and trouble I got to go to do something relatively simple. At least that's what I'm getting at the moment. And then I have to try and keep track of it here. And I think that as I add more bits and pieces, it's probably going to get, or what did I just do? Control Z, okay, responds to Control Z, okay, that's good. Okay, so I can close something down. But it's possible to use modifiers to modify things. But having the basic LFO not seem to have those things on board, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe this does that. It seems to be telling me that's about phase offset. Glide. Oh, okay. Fair enough, would need to look into that a little bit more to understand it, but obviously anything to do with changing shapes. But I just had to add a whole other device to do something that should be relatively simple. Well, I think would be relatively simple, because on a fixed architecture synth, you'd have your LFO and some sort of a delay or ramp in. So, but another envelope generator, this time for... You know what's coming. Do you know what I haven't seen? Any way to tell me what... Ah, here we go. 12 dB, 24 dB, fair enough, it is there. So you have to choose your shape, then choose your depth. Then obviously choose all the things that it's doing. So no, that's not changing that amount. So we've got obviously a couple of different places at which we can change things, so it's going to depend on the user as to where they feel comfortable to do that. Okay, sounds nice enough. Oh, there is a high quality mode. Like so many of these, I feel like the sound actually falls flat when you go into high quality or oversampled mode, which means that there is some kind of evil alias thing happening, but it seems to add to the sound, because as soon as you turn it off, I feel like the sound becomes kind of dead and clinical. Okay, fair enough. I obviously don't have to have it on. There may be times where, and I haven't looked to see whether this will get into FMing, it doesn't seem to show anything in terms of FMing, which is a shame, because with a limited wave set, as in this is no kind of wave sweeping kind of synthesizer, you can't put in serum wavetables and do that whole thing. But that's nice. Let's change our... Let's just change our whole synth here. Let's give ourselves a second oscillator, which is defaulting to 32, sneaky. Okay, Snowflake looks like ring modulating. We can change our waveform that way, and it is nice. But in Reason terms, that puts it more to say a subtractor than a Europa, which is a wave wobbling all over the place kind of a situation, should you want it. To what degree you would want that as well. I'm not a big fan of that, but it is very useful, and I like the ability to control waves the way you do. Okay, so putting something into a specific position can be tricky, but you've got your octaves, so I guess you just have to work that way, or you can type in specific semitone amounts. Control-click to send it back where it came from. But it does have that nice, well, very digital analog kind of thing. I think maybe it's driving the filter a little bit. We've got some nice contrast here, as you can hear the LFO moving against each other, so it's changing our tunings. So there's less. But again, it feels to me very digital. Not that that is wrong, but just if they're saying it's very analog, I'm thinking that this is the world's most polite analog. Just saw a little bit of the Wendy Carlos thing from, I think it was the mid-70s, showing off making sounds. You know, this goes to here and to there, and it's like, oh my god, the instrument is so sort of like all the time, and everything in the sound is just, you know, and this doesn't have that. It's very detailed and very precise. But it's sort of quite pleasant. Let's see if I find a filter that I like. Maybe we are... What do these default to? To 100%. Okay. Let's put them at -12. It's probably easier to type it in. I don't like typing. -12. Okay, that makes them more polite. And sometimes a 12 really just is better for this. Now I have to remember which thing belongs to which. I think this is the one I'm after. I guess I can always go look there, but that seems unnecessary to me. So I would question, why isn't there already just sitting here perhaps an LFO called vibrato and an envelope generator called filter? Because you're always going to want one. And again, forgive me, I may be wrong. Oh, ugh. Yeah, that that may be a good feature, but let's see what happens here. Let's close that up. Okay. So that's offering me release. That's offering me attack. Release. We'd have to read the manual, or maybe the little box that keeps popping up there. There's a feature in there. Maybe good, maybe bad. I'm not quite sure what to think of that. Okay, ways to change modulations or phase and what have you. Okay, a little bit of control over what does what there. There's a certain sound I'm just not being able to get out of this. And I love synth brass, but I'm either just missing it, or it's kind of not in its range, which seems strange to me. This is annoying, constantly changing shape and size. What does one mean? I don't know. I just made a Keith Emerson style, touch and go style brass in another on-screen modular, and it was pretty easy to make. This isn't behaving the same way, and it's not a case of the filter. I would still have the main thing going. So that to be honest is a little off-putting. It's technically a very, very detailed instrument. Okay, that's more like it. So the attack in this case needed to be a lot less. It's probably just too far out. So that's kind of user error, but it's hard for me to see with these things all over the place and constantly moving. If I were a blind personage, a sightless personage, this must be really, really hard to use. You know, if you've got a fixed architecture in front of you, let's pick a Jupiter 8. It's fixed architecture, as in the knobs are always where they are. They're not going to go somewhere else. Then once you've got used to where the knobs are, then you could always use that, because they're where they are is like Braille, in the sense that an A is an A. Here, an A could be a Q, or it could be a Z, or for another patch, it could be the words 1, 2, 3 multiplied by 7, 8, and 9. And while being sighted and this, that, and the other, we should be able to adapt to this, and we kind of can. I feel like it's a bit complex. How much that one would get used to that over time, obviously it remains to be seen. Still just not getting... Just goes from kind of ping to... Maybe it's in the effects. Let's turn the chorus on. Okay, so how does this work? We click that, we open up. Single chorus, double chorus. Obviously cut downs, but... And then that's the mix. Alright, delay. Okay, you can move into a free mode, which is good. It has that sound. Now, of course, I don't love that it's not moving. There's nothing on board. So let's see if we add another LFO to delay time. All right, it lets me make that a little drunk. That's free. That's good. Piano keyboard grid melodies and modulating frequency parameters of the slaughter. Looks like it gives you a kind of FM. We won't get into that for the moment. Okay, alright, so it's telling me that there's something modulated in here. It's got a funny little draggy button. There's the old compression. Ooh. That was the auto gain. Can I move these around? Default save as, maybe there's patches and stuff for them, but there doesn't seem to be any way to reorder them. So why would I want my reverb before everything else? Not getting it. Obviously the synth is very, very capable. That one. Let's slow this right down. Okay, changing that. All right. So it's in this shape. It still sounds rather polite, and I'm not convinced with the effects, to be honest. We'll leave. So to get what feels like a more linear slope, you've got to push it up there. These tend to feel retarded. And fair enough, that makes a certain amount of sense as what's this drive like? Okay, obviously you want to use it with care. We'll try that. These are all flanger. Fairly typical for an onboard instrument effect. Then it gets into having more and more complexity, so those two can that's defaulted to something else. So I can see why people are feeling like that despite there being a lot on offer, that it's not bringing a lot. I think given time, you'd probably find your way into things that you liked. Obviously, that's pretty cool. Have a little less of that. But the problem here, that at least on the surface, is that it feels very technical. It feels like a synth that has technical ability based upon the fact that theory says it has all this architecture. Well, it has it because it's there, but it feels kind of like it's more good on paper than it is in reality. Now, these filters obviously are kind of cool. That is the extreme one, so we'll... And that does sound nice. But again, let's look what happens when we slow this down. That one might be a bit too much. What are you doing? Fallen. Easy to grab the wrong thing. Let's bring a second filter into play. So double click. And let's have it, this one's slow, so let's just cobble from here. I've got headphones, so I'm actually hearing quite a bit of distortion. It's distortion that I should imagine is meant to be there. Is that the right one? Let's go to gentle, because I just don't want to hear distortion at the moment. So that's adding movement. Not being able to reorder effects just strikes me as maybe I'm missing something. Automate, remote, no. But I would never want to use effects in this order. I get that somebody else might want to, but why would I want to do this? So that's kind of making the effects a little bit, why would I want them? As a contrast, let's just say, okay, fair enough, because I tend to be down on almost all onboard effects. Let's pick something that I know pretty darned well and go with Hertz delay. I use this all the time. It is free on higher hertz. Okay, so we've got some chorusing happening here. Let's add in a and let's give it a little bit of reverb as well. This is a single effect, but it acts kind of like a multi-effect. So we've got our drive at the beginning, which is what makes sense to me, because you're more likely to get nastiness if you put it after everything. We're chorusing, adding an overt echo, and then a kind of a little collection of other echoes at the end, so a slight reverby kind of thing. Now, I like that way better than what I was getting So in terms of going, okay, well, it's got these amazing effects, it does. Are they amazing in use? Well, I guess you'd have to find your own way there. There is the ability to choose how we want our filters to run in serial, in parallel, or per oscillator. I haven't studied. Per oscillator would seem to simply be polyphonic synth, but I don't. Actually, this is not attaching itself to filter. Now it is. So are these actually... Well, that's a completely different result. I don't know what that does. I'm going to assume that this is normal synth behavior. Then we've got the ability to offset all of the filter points. I wonder if that's modifiable. Can we XLFO that? Yes, we can. And we can do the same with our resonance peaks as well. So in that sense, it starts to make a much more moving sound. So it's nice in that sense. It's very detailed, which gives that feeling of more digital than analog, because analog is true analog, and I struggle with a lot of the modern boxes that people pile up so they can go doorless. In that, to me, they don't feel like the analogs of yore, as in talking about Wendy and her wall of modules, or even as late as Jupiter 8s, which were mungy grungy sorts of things. And it's annoying when they're like that. And I do like digital synths in reality. I used to think that when I listened to my Tangerine Dream records from the mid-80s that, oh, they must all be analog and it's great. And I realised a lot of what I was liking were actually digital synths, Waldorfs and synclaviers and what have you. So there's nothing right or wrong. But this multiple filter architecture is nice, but you only get 2. So you kind of got to wonder, why couldn't we have 37? Oh, hang on, no, I can have 3, 4, 4. So I can have 4, which I think is from memory the same as Volcano. So let's do a high pass. I feel like that changed the sound of it somehow. Interesting. Odd. In a good way. I feel it's odd, but as soon as I introduced this high pass, which is supposedly a clean one, at 23, which is kind of, there's not much of use down there, it seemed to actually sound better. And that actually now is sounding really cool. So what is it there? Maybe it works on the assumption that one filter or two filters is probably not going to get you there, but several filters. Maybe it's that combination of we'll call them distortions, that are inside each of these kinds of filters. Maybe they compound. They are in serial, meaning that damage done here is compounded by damage done here is compounded by damage done here. And that is possibly what's getting us closer to that feeling of what we call analog. It's suddenly less polite. Let's turn off those effects. Now it sounds nice. Does it hold up? Now obviously I'm pressing this button, so I may have some sort of preconceived idea. It's a placebo effect that I'm adding. Other people have to tell me whether they feel like they can hear this or not, but I feel like it gets better. And becomes a nicer synth. Still don't know whether I'm sold on these, but it doesn't mean that they can't have use in their time and place. It starts to become more effects than synth at some point in here. And in which case, you could have anything and it will still sound great if you've got enough effects that are adding value. But this is where I think the whole thing becomes interesting, not so much when you go one filter. I work with the one filter model because most of the synths that I had when I started had one filter, or none if it was a Casio ZZ, but that was one filter per line of its voice architecture. This idea of having four filters running in one synth at once was just crazy town on a fixed architecture instrument. Again, let's just pick Jupiter 8. You didn't have four filters running at once. Maybe you did outboard, but that's pretty cool. And moving this master actually has turned out to be kind of a, shall we say, a master stroke. Let's turn that off. And let's reset him. Okay, we lose a lot of coof from that. So it's an interesting idea. I feel like, as I said earlier on, I think what's happened is that they've got all this architecture that they've built for their other devices. They've got some oscillators, which are nice enough oscillators, but don't do a lot. Compared to what we might expect from something that looks like this. If they were put into more of a fixed format, Jupiter 8, Juno 106 kind of format, then we probably wouldn't even question why they're not capable of doing more stretchy, squawky kinds of things. But the fact that they're made to look that way makes us probably question or assume that they're going to. And then when they don't, it's like, oh, okay, so we've got all this for that. Obviously, we could be getting into modulating something like this, I guess. and the synth starts to come alive more. The filters, I think, are a strength and a weakness. We grab onto this because, oh, it's FabFilter, and their filters are the best. I've always found them clinical. Great, but clinical. And I feel like this synth comes across that way in the end. Clinical. When you put in more and more movement, then the filters are able to do what they're good at doing. So that answers, as I thought before, the difference between immediately being like, with Volcano, where I was using it as a mix EQ and as a bus and a mastering EQ, was like, oh, because these filters, whether they're designed that way because they were designed as EQ filters, I'm not sure, but they seem to reward far better with a more complex input. And then when the input is simple, they don't do a lot. But because of their detail, where a more mungy filter, shall we say, probably just muddies the waters when adding more complex information, these are so see-through, so clear, that they shine far better when given more complex information, because it allows them to start to become more like the mungy. Let's say a mini Moog filter, which is classic for its munginess. You can give it not very complex material and suddenly it's like it sounds more... that's the theory behind it, and often the practice. These, if you feed them simple material, I think actually reduce the interest of the material, but if you feed them more complex material, I think they add the ability for layers of movement and detail that the mungifying Moog-style filter, a real mini Moog filter, and I'm only using these as example, just kind of makes too much mess. It's like if you've got a 47 tap delay, it's entirely possible that you've just got mess, not a nice cool rolling rhythm. Whereas this is more like, well, give it something simple and it just won't sound like you're doing anything at all. Give it something more complex. And this kind of really intricate digital detail thing then starts to shine and bring something that's what digital is very, very good at. But of course, it's going to sound very, very digital because it doesn't have the munginess of a true analog, which is invariably what we love about it, just making an awful muddy mess of things, in hopefully a kind sort of a way. And I think the the effects here are probably doing the same thing compared to this, which is pretty messy. So I hear that and I go, and I hear what's on board, and I feel kind of like it just kind of made it less rather than more. So in terms of what it is, it's kind of a basic synthesizer with quite a lot of ability with modulation. It's not a full modular, and that's okay. I'm not going to punish it for that. But it does seem to... Let's just turn him off. It does seem to improve things with more complex inputs. So let's just turn him off. And then you've got to come to terms with loving this system here of hear how that comes to life better with this little bit of movement here. So I think it's a synth that if you got it and you put your time into it. Like, let's say this was the first synth that I got. Instead of my Casio CZ, this was where I started, and I, being me, put my time into going, this is what I've got, I'm going to know this. Then I think this would become my benchmark, just as the CZ and now my Thor and Europa are my benchmarks. I think this would be the benchmark, and I would find other synths wanting because they don't do things the same as this. So I think there is actually a very nice synth in here, based around a surprisingly simple architecture, which is then complexified with the ability to add these modulation things. I don't know what sort slots does, but at that point it undoes its simplicity. Not only an expectation of the audience who look at the complexity and go, oh, this is going to be like serum or pigments or insert whatever, rather than going, this is like Subtractor. For those of you who don't know Subtractor, let me just pull him up just so you get the concept of what I'm talking about. There we go. Boom. I think that in many ways what FabFilter Twin cubed has is a lot more like this. This was actually designed by one of the fellows from Nord Lead, and it's quite a digital synth that's capable of doing some really, really lovely work when you learn to make the most of it. And I think we're going to have the same situation here, but Subtractor, you look at it and immediately you get the impression, okay, this is a pretty simple synth. A lot of people pass it over and don't spend time looking at what it's really capable of because it seems simple. So the opposite kind of happens here. I think it's capable of sounding very nice, and if you slot it in as being, this is a simple synth that's going to at the heart do my simple sounds, and then I can expand it into doing more interesting things, I think that there's a huge amount of value in it. How that sits with the dollar proposition, and I better actually have a look at what the dollar proposition is, to be fair here, then I think it's going to be like, okay, that's cool, not cool, or whatever you're looking at. That's the gentle. There's a meatiness in there, and that's from, I guess, the let's tighten that up. That does sound nice. Let's turn this out again. Again, it feels like it improves. It feels like it gets more body, more bass. Maybe that's just masking or unmasking. Maybe the fact that this is just, see how it's outputting all this level here, maybe that is swallowing some of this, masking it. So by turning this on, we're making this a little bit more available to hear. I can't see any difference there, but music's about hearing. It just feels like it improves with that. Interesting to know what it is. My guess in the situation probably just has to be that this level sitting here in all its digital purity is just masking. So again, it's one of those things that if you were building a full standalone instrument, you might well say, look, it's never going to sound as good until we do that, in which case you might just hard code that in. No one knows that it's there. Nobody's going to bitch about it being a high pass at 23 hertz because, well, no one lives down there. It's useless. And in this case, potentially actually doing damage. So very, very interesting. You just need to be the person who's going to say, this is going to become my instrument that I spend a lot of time with to find how to get the results that I want. The effects, I am not sold on at all. I would rather that they had not put them in there at all, or if they did, that they could be rearranged. The fact they can't be rearranged, I'm also kind of wondering why these can't be rearranged. But it might become a total nightmare in the back end, in which case I would still probably rather go back to a laid out matrix, in which I would be saying, let's have a look at, well, Europa will do the job because it's got the same thing. We've got this matrix here. It's very easy to use. I can get an envelope, which is already assigned here. Like, I don't even need to say, oh, I need to do things to make that happen. I can, but I'm incredibly used to this. But it's a different sound. We add a second one of these. Obviously a lot more. There is a nice smoothness in there, whereas Europa can feel a little hard and there. There are ways to change that, but this does sound nice. So I think that it's kind of an extra that they're building on top of all their existing architecture. They're going, yeah, we can do this. And they have done it. And this is interesting, and it's going to work really well for some. Some will find this uber cool. I find it confusing. Okay, there are presets in here, but I would never want them anyway. So it's a not useful thing for me. You can turn on the virtual keyboard, yes, no. MIDI learning of things, you can change polyphony. Oh, there is a Unison thing. That'll please a lot of people. Okay, tuning, detuning, there's obviously various options for alternate tunings and stuff like that too. So with this, once it's pulled back to simple sounds, I think it offers a lot that's really rather nice. There's some sort of drive going on in there. Is that it is driving reason a little, so we might need to look at that in all fairness. Output volume. Compared to, obviously not meant to sound. We can and probably should be fair and add. So there appears to be a softness in here. That is off. When we would expect them to not sound the same. But starting with basic sounds, it seems to kind of shine. The fact that I couldn't get brass to seem to be what I would expect it to be, I find confusing. Having to rely on Unison to get sexiness. I still can't work out how to get cool synth brass from it, and that to me is just the point at which I look at the value of an instrument right from the get-go. It's these things staying open is annoying, but it's got potential for loveliness. It just seems to lie outside of where I'd want it to be. But that said, this is a sound that, in theory, I should be able to build easily in Reason devices, but doesn't come as easily. So every synth is going to have its weight towards doing this, which pulls it away from doing that. So I think, like a lot of very modern synths, is designed to appeal to a certain person, probably by a certain person who likes a certain sound, so everything goes towards that. And equally, the same can be said of me and my devices. I like a certain sort of sound, so naturally I'm going to skew them towards that, because to me that's the sound I'm looking for. Why would I make a device that I find useless? It seems little sense to me, nor can I recommend it to anybody else if I find it useless. I think there's a lot going on in here. You just need to be the person who takes the time to work out how to find the beauty and actually make it happen. And as you see, it's been taking me quite some time to find that beauty, which I gotta say worries me a little bit. So EG3 is what we're actually looking for. This is nice. So my bottom line here is that, okay, we'll do this as a good and bad at this point, which is that the modulation system is potentially powerful. The oscillators are, well, they are built as standard, old-school subtractive synths, and they do deliver quite nicely there. They do have some inbuilt things that allow for some richness to them, but they're not the richest oscillators. The filters are, I keep just using the word detailed. Now, I borrowed that from somebody else, and as he was saying it, I'm thinking, this matches exactly how I often feel about things and how I generally feel about FabFilter, and why I don't actually end up using their devices, is that they tend to be incredibly detailed. And as I've pointed out, that works really well in certain situations, but not necessarily so well in others. I think that they are, in their own way, tremendous filter models, and they suit certain situations but not others. So if you come in expecting that is going to be a mini Moog, I think you're going to find that it falls flat. But if you come in expecting a digital instrument that has a lot of technical ability, then that's fine. You've got to put the time in to get there. So what's good is that there's, at least on paper, a fair amount of potential, and the models in here, they are good. They are really detailed, but very digital. If you pile them up and you use those layers of detail by building them yourself, then they reward you in that way. If you don't put enough detail into them, they don't reward you because there's nothing for them to work on. Whereas a mini Moog filter, as I've pointed out, is prone to being the other way. You can feed it very little and it really makes a mess of it in what can be either a totally annoying way or a beautiful way because it's added something that wasn't there in the first place. This doesn't really add anything. It's almost like it just pulls things out and makes you more aware of them. And in which case, if you're feeding it the right information, it is superb. So the filter, the heart of it, obviously is the heart of their business. Everything else feels like it's a bit complex. The fact that you've got all these modules that you can do stuff with, and there are more that I didn't touch on. I touched on them far more in the volcano video. Then that's quite cool. It's given time and the willingness to work with what it is. I think that there is a tremendously usable. We'll start at saying synth for basics, and people will be like, but I think that's really important. I think that if you don't get some of your basics right in your sounds, then it's hard to build the direction that you're wanting to go. And I think this is capable of really doing that if you sit down and work with it for what it is. And that also means if you're able to do that, because there are some downsides here. I think the weaknesses are the true biggest downside is I think that these oscillators are too simple. Because these filters don't come alive until you feed them something interesting, complex, moving, something that you wouldn't want to do as much with a true classic analog because it would just be a mess. This needs it, in which case these are too simple, that they need to have something else going on with them. Let's just add some noise here, just to see what happens, because I didn't... See, again, adds so much more. So the real falling down comes to be the thing that they haven't looked at, and perhaps they should have approached somebody else if they can't do it. But I think that all of these oscillator models, looking at something like, let's say, Europa, in the sense that we've got these models that we can vary and they can do different sorts of things. It's all just math. I think if FabFilter's Twin here was running oscillators like that, they would have a completely different ball game, and they'd have a killer synth. So maybe Twin 4, Twin 10 or something like that, they will go, okay, yep, this has been our Achilles heel in having this section that's great but needs something detailed to go into it to use what it's great at. Otherwise we're feeding it its weakness. So these are your limit, unfortunately, that they are simple. It is possible, obviously, to complexify them. And that's, I think, what they're really hoping you're going to be doing with all of this. It's possible to take, okay, this is assigned to something. Let's take it up into, I don't know what that is doing. And this is a weakness too. We'd have to understand what that's really about to work out how to do it, but I thought that was going to give us FM. But it does give us a more Interesting sound, if not perhaps just a little too interesting. Effects are close to useless, unfortunately. You can get some mileage out of them, but you've got so little control over them. Not so much from within what they do. You expect this on boards. In theory, you should be able to have more, but then they'd be unselling their bigger devices. But the fact that you can't rearrange them just strikes me as a total fail. Okay, you can rearrange that one. So they're aware. You could put hard drive pre-effects. Just sort of sounds bad now. So they're very, very limited use, but this modulation thing, in theory, it's great. In practice, I just find it is far more convoluted than necessary, and because each of these modules is stripped right back, well, they have some interesting features. Things like being able to... Oh, that's a phase offset. Okay. All right. Being able to have a fade in just seems to be totally missing. Therefore, I have to add it myself in another way. Now, there are times where you do need to do that. Just made a video on, well, when I made the brass thing for the other synth, yeah, I used extra modules, but they were extra things. I don't think I should need to do some of the basics here. I get why they want to make each of these as small as possible, but then it ends up feeling like I'm having to play around doing a whole lot of things that should be a lot simpler. So the downsides are that I think that they've got some great parts, particularly the guts. That's their stock in trade. And then it's let down by cleverness in this, rather than thinking, how do we make a beautiful instrument? And as a result, depending upon what its price is, if it's cheap, then, or cheap for you, then it's possibly a really good thing. And in many ways, there's plenty which could make, as I said, for a great instrument to cover basics. I know Dan Worrell's a big fan of this instrument. I hear him do things and it's like, wow, that sounds really great. But I think invariably it's doing basics. As you stretch this out, it will stretch, but I don't think it'll stretch as far as it should, especially if it is priced up against things like Serum or Pigments or Zebra, in the sort of $150, $200 arena. And again, I have to pop up price. But if it's down a lot cheaper, then that's a bit of a different ball game in terms of what we would expect from it. So fascinating instrument, but I feel like it's been made more out of the encouragement of a marketing team than a true understander of instruments and what's going to make what they do have shine. If you have any broad questions, obviously not about the FabFilter thing, because I'm not FabFilter, then pop them on down below, preferably after hitting subscribe. My name again is Benedict for Higher Hertz. There's higherhertz.com, which has different streams of information, and obviously you can get your sticky fingers on things like Hertz delay and the Hertz multiplier. They're freebies, which if you liked the sounds that I was getting as a result of them, they are available. Most important, get out there, have a play. There is a demo of this, which you can get your hands on and use. Spend some time with it. I think you're going to find after a little while that it feels like you, or it doesn't feel like you. If it feels like you, spend more time with it. And you're just going to dig deeper and deeper and deeper. And I think then you're really going to get what it's good at doing. I've to some extent missed that, but I found some things that suggest to me that it is there. So long as I can expand on those, then I think there's a great instrument in here within its limits. If you don't feel like you can relate to it, then move on. There are other instruments that probably suit what you're looking for better. All right, well, get out there, have a play with it, have a great day. Just a little addendum. I wasn't 100% happy that I got everything out. I think you can probably tell, but spent just a little bit more time chasing something that I might use myself. And there are beautiful sounds in here. But to get there, I've had to let go of certain assumptions and use more filters than I would normally do. So filter 4 here. Without it, the sound is just not charming. I have abandoned these effects for now and just gone with Hertz delay. But there's a nice lift and airiness in this sound. That I would use that in one of my own pieces. Obviously that's a personal choice, but it does back my feelings that in here there is actually a very nice synth. But you do need to take your time to understand how it thinks and to accept its limits. I'm still frustrated here that to get a little bit more sort of excitement in this, that I need to do things that I don't necessarily think I want to do, like this XLFO here with oscillator sync. Hear how this becomes a bit transparent, and not in a good way, as in it will disappear in a mix. Now I've got no problems with adding, I don't know why that does that. I want to add unusualness to waves, but I've got very little in the way of options to do it past sync or whatever that LFO thing, which may be that it won't really do that in the first place. So I have to add this in. Which is layers of extra work. But the sound that I have here is a beautiful one and one I'd be more than happy to use. So the basics, if you chase them and you spend the time adding the layers, because you've got to build everything up by hand in this to really get what it can do. And by the time you're going to that much having to build things by hand, then you are probably going to be like, why can't I do something more with these oscillator forms, because then I can really make them move. But I just thought I'd add that little addendum because I think it is important. I don't want to seem like I'm down and saying that it's not able to do cool things. It clearly is. This is lovely. And would be a little harder to do elsewhere. So the combination of, I think mostly they're filters, once we've got an interesting enough oscillator source to make it work. But I did have to layer up several of them. This one doesn't have to be there, but it does bring some more movement. Because it's all about how these filters all interact with each other that it becomes interesting. And if you're willing to put the time and energy into doing that, then I think the instrument really does shine. Does it shine better than any other? I don't know, but it does shine because it's those FabFilter models and the thing that they do. So I hope that adds a little bit more value. Thank you.